I mean, I've worked with Palestinians for many years. The last couple of years, is the first time I've heard Palestinians in the West Bank say we're scared. And when they say we're scared, they mean they're scared of the Palestinian Authority. They say we're living under two occupations, in a sense. So that's in place. The only obstacle to imposing this apartheid regime is Hamas and the Palestinian street in Gaza that is still resisting, that hasn't been pacified. And that, I think, explains this ferocious attack in Gaza. Even if we say, and we know there's a context, even if we say, let's go the Israeli way, and say we're simply responding to rockets that have been thrown into Israel by Hamas. Okay. You can't explain the ferocity and the disproportionality of the Israeli response merely by security, merely by those rockets. You can't explain that. You can't explain things. You can't explain the destruction of $2 billion of infrastructure in a poor area that almost had no infrastructure. I don't know where Israel found $2 billion to destroy. The destruction of probably 20 to 30,000 homes in Gaza over the last month. The killing not only of 1,400 civilians and people, but 400 kids, plus hundreds more wounded. You can't explain that level of the use of weapons that have never ever been used before in military conflict. Weapons that don't have any battlefield use, only have use against civilians. You can't explain all that simply by security, simply by wanting to stop these rockets from Hamas. There's something else, and I think, and Israel says it openly. First of all, we want to weaken Hamas enough that Abu Mazen, Abbas, and the Fatah can come back and take over Gaza. The problem is that we don't seem to have a real solution in front of us. That's the problem. Because the two-state solution seems to be gone. Apartheid is unacceptable. And the one-state solution is not yet on the agenda. You know, we're very far because it'll be framed as the end of Israel as a Jewish state. That's not acceptable to governments around the world, certainly not to Israel. And so it'll be a while before that gets some kind of occurrence. I think it's starting to happen, but so in a way we're stuck without a solution. So part of our job is to hasten the end of the occupation, to hasten some kind of a solution, but also to give the Palestinians some protective space. We have to be there for the Palestinians. You know, somebody likened them to a little grain of sand that's messing up this whole engine, this whole machinery of conquest and occupation and global occupation, American empire and beyond. And you got this little grain of sand. Well, how long can that last? How long can the Palestinians hang on? So we have to be there for them and really work to support them and give them that space until such a time as a solution to this conflict begins to emerge. Because we're not there yet. And I think that that's part of the job that we have to do. I want to sort of leave it, but I just want to show you a couple pictures, just for a couple minutes before we go. This is what I call the matrix of control. At any rate, what you see on this map is how I got to the Bantustan map. In other words, the brown areas are where Palestinians live, in the West Bank. 95% of the Palestinians live in these areas A and B that are 40% of the occupied territories. In other words, 95% of the Palestinians live on 40% of 22% of a small country. And that fragmented, as you can see, into all these islands. There are 70 separate islands. Some of them so small you hardly see them, in which Palestinians are confined, all surrounded by 650 obstacles to movement. And these make up, then, the cantons that are defined by these pink areas, that are what Israel calls its settlement blocks. 7 settlement blocks that we want to keep permanently, as a minimum. A Jordan Valley block that controls the border with Jordan and the river. The Ariel block that divides the West Bank east and west around the city of Ariel, that sits atop the largest water aquifer. And now you see the northern canton emerging. The Modi'in block around the city of Modi'in that straddles the West Bank, that straddles the border, and is being built as the largest city in Israel. 3 settlement blocks that make up what we call Greater Israeli Jerusalem, that controls the whole center of the West Bank and isolates Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. Now, the World Bank estimates that 40% of the Palestinian economy revolves around Jerusalem. So by doing this, creating a Greater Jerusalem, we're cutting the economic heart out of any Palestinian state. And just let me show you a couple pictures, just to, not everybody has been there, just to visualize this. This is a settlement. Again, the language. When you say settlement to somebody, what is a settlement? You know, you think of 5 cabins on a hilltop somewhere. Settlements, some of these settlements, like Halper, are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 people. They're satellite cities, many of them. So when you say, well, all right, there can be a 2-state solution. Okay, we'll remove the settlements. Great, you go remove this. You know, once you see them, you understand how permanent and massive these facts on the ground are. That's where Israel really has made this ideology. The first slide I showed with exclusivity and all that stuff, that's philosophy. Fine. But the point is that Israel's taken those elements of exclusivity and security and actualized them, I guess you'd say, in terms of concrete facts on the ground. So that we've made, in fact, our control of the West Bank permanent by settlements, by a whole system of segregated highways that link the settlement blocks into Israel. Look, here's a new road that's being built in Jerusalem with a wall down the center. One side of the wall will be Palestinian traffic, the other side Israeli traffic. Even in South Africa, you never had divided highways like that. House demolitions. You know, Israel's demolished 25,000 homes in the occupied territory since 1967. And that doesn't include, we're going to have to see in the next couple of weeks, the tally, the thousands of homes demolished in Gaza over the last couple of weeks. So house demolitions is an ongoing process of ethnic cleansing. Because if you deny someone a home, and these aren't terrorists. This fellow, Salim Shawamri, was with me in Vancouver. We did a tour together here. Some of you have met Salim. His house has been demolished 4 times. He's not a terrorist. He was never accused of anything, never charged with anything, never did anything. Why did they? So this is the issue. Because Israel casts everything as security. Right? We're defending ourselves against terrorism. We have a right to defend our citizens, all this stuff. Okay? Well, why did you demolish Salim's house? If it had nothing to do with security, if those 25,000 homes or more were demolished not for security, If you build 250 settlements, not for security. Israel never claimed a security reason for that. The line of the wall I'll show you. You can't explain by security. The uprooting of all of the fruit trees. The economic closure. Wait a minute. If none of those elements of occupation can be explained by security and terrorism, then your explanation is leaving something out. There's something you're not telling me. Why did you demolish Salim's house? And it's a proactive policy of taking control of the country. That's what's going on. It's obvious to us, but it is not obvious to the media, to the politicians, because it's lost in the Israeli framing. So house demolitions shows that. And finally, the wall. The wall isn't built for security. It's ridiculous. Look at the root of the wall. If it was for security, it'd be built on the border. You know, the wall is obviously a border. It defines the Bantustan. So it hugs area A and B. When it hits a settlement block, it goes around the settlement block. Here's Ariel. Here's where the wall is. You go tell me that the wall is here for security. It's obvious that it's defining the Bantustan and it's incorporating the settlement blocks into Israel proper, including Greater Jerusalem. In fact, this is apartheid. We call it apartheid. Apartheid in English is separation. Apart. That's what it means in Afrikaans. That's what we call our policy. We call our policy in Hebrew hafradah, which means separation. It means apart. We use the apartheid word. We simply say it in Hebrew instead of in Afrikaans. And that's the policy towards Palestinians. This is what we call our demographic border. How's that for a concept of a Western democracy? A demographic border. And the name of the wall, the official name, is the separation barrier, not the security barrier. We say that up front. We're not hiding that. And so you've got this barrier, which is twice as high as the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was 4 meters high. That's it. The Israeli wall against the Palestinians is 8 meters high. It's 5 times longer than the Berlin Wall was. And unlike the Berlin Wall, it's not linear, but it encircles, it encompasses, it imprisons tens of thousands of Palestinians literally in cells. This is the city of Tulkarm. 70,000 people completely surrounded by a wall with one entrance and exit controlled by the Israeli army. And in fact, in urban neighborhoods, in Jerusalem and other places, Palestinians leave every day through these gates and checkpoints that are humiliating. They take hours sometimes. And I'm telling you, and there's a film called Checkpoint that I really recommend to everybody. It's a film without narration, simply the documentation of what's happening at checkpoints. And you know of the Israeli organization Maxom Watch, Checkpoint Watch, that has a website with all kinds of testimonies, women that go out, my wife is a part of it, they go out to monitor the behavior of soldiers. If you're a teenage girl, you're going to be harassed every single day. If you're a teenage boy and you look cross-eyed at a soldier, or you're too slow in taking out your identity card, you're going to be put in the sun for 6 hours to bake and then sent home. So I can't begin to tell you the experience, the humiliation that goes on at checkpoints. And these are permanent. This is going to be forever. It's a life sentence in a sense. And the wall does not separate between Israelis and Palestinians, because Jews don't have a very positive association with walls. It's not one of the good parts of our history. So we build the wall deep in Palestinian areas where we can't see it. So here's a woman in Bethlehem. Her grandchildren are in Beit Jala. And the wall goes right through her community. There's no Israelis in this whole picture. The wall goes through school courtyards. This is a high school in Anata. The hoop is on the other side of the wall. And this is Abu Dis. No Israelis here. What's the security if you got Palestinians on both sides of the wall? It's not for security. And this is Al-Quds University. And a Palestinian university with a wall through the campus. And it's not the only one, preventing students and faculty from getting to classes. The wall goes on and on. In the rural areas, it becomes a fence, and Israelis would much prefer you to use the word fence than wall, because it sounds a little better, but it's an electrified fence with sensors, patrol roads, trenches, secondary fences. You can imagine the environmental and economic damage that this 750-kilometer barrier creates in the country. And olive trees. Look, this is a 400-year-old olive tree. Uprooted to make way for the wall, to make way for a settlement, to make way for a highway. You know, can you imagine having 400, 500-year-old? There are some olive trees that are 2,000 years old. Having that for 500 years, 1,000 years or more in your family, in your orchard, giving sustenance to generation after generation, being the only permanent part of the family, and having it uprooted. And you know what happens to these trees? They're sold to the Nouveau Riche in Tel Aviv. That's where these trees go. So this goes so far beyond security and even conflict. This gets into what in anthropology we call symbolic wounds. These are things that will almost never be healed. We're making the conflict so permanent, so deep, that it defies any kind of reconciliation even. That's what really this I think symbolizes. So that's where we're going. We're going to fight against it. And I think we can win. I think this is unsustainable, and we've beaten systems like this before. We can defeat it, but we have to know what we're fighting. We have to know the language we're using, how to present it, how to analyze it, so that we can be as effective as possible. And I think our role is to try to hasten the end of the system as fast as possible.